I didn't expect to see Craig again. Not there. Not like that. The conference was already overwhelming enough. Too many people, too many voices blending into that constant hum of forced networking and polite smiles. I'd only come because my manager insisted it would be good exposure, whatever that meant. Honestly, I was counting down the hours until I could leave, grab something decent to eat, and forget the whole thing happened. I was standing near one of those tall cocktail tables, pretending to read a brochure I had zero interest in, when I heard someone say my name. Lucas, there's something strange about hearing your name in a place where no one is supposed to know you. It cuts through everything instantly. I turned without thinking, and there he was, Craig. For a second, my brain didn't catch up. It was like looking at a memory that had somehow stepped into the present. Same eyes, same slightly crooked smile. Just older, sharper around the edges, more sure of himself. 7 years disappeared in a blink, and somehow felt heavier than ever at the same time. Craig, I said, and it came out more like a question than a statement. He let out a quiet laugh, like he couldn't quite believe it either. Yeah, wow. I wasn't sure it was you at first. Same, I admitted, even though that wasn't entirely true. I'd recognized him instantly. My body had, at least, that same quick tension in my chest, like something unfinished had just been reopened. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, both trying to bridge a gap neither of us knew how to cross. You look, he started, then paused, like he was choosing his words carefully. Good, really good. I smiled a little awkwardly. You too. It was the kind of exchange you'd expect between old acquaintances. Casual, safe, but there was something underneath it, something neither of us was acknowledging yet. Didn't expect to run into you here, I added. Yeah, same. My company sent me last minute, he said. You? Pretty much the same story. Another pause. God, I hated pauses like that. The kind that stretch just a little too long, filled with everything you're not saying. 7 years. 7 years since the last time I saw him. Since everything ended in that quiet, unresolved way that somehow sticks with you longer than anything dramatic ever could. Back then, we weren't anything official. At least, not in the way you'd explain to other people. But we were something. Something that mattered. Something that felt bigger than what either of us knew how to handle at the time. And then, just like that, it was gone. No closure. No real explanation. Just distance, and eventually silence. And now he was standing in front of me like no time had passed. So, Craig said, glancing around the room, then back at me. Are you here alone? The question was simple. Normal. But I felt it. Yeah, I said. You? He nodded. Yeah. Something in his expression softened at that. Or maybe I imagined it. I wasn't sure anymore what was real and what was just memory filling in the blanks. We ended up moving to a quieter corner of the venue, away from the main crowd. It wasn't planned. Just sort of happened, like we both needed space to actually talk. So, 7 years, he said, shaking his head slightly. That's crazy. Yeah, I replied. It is. I wanted to ask him 100 things. Where he'd been, what he'd been doing, why he disappeared the way he did. But none of those felt like first conversation after 7 years kind of questions. Instead, I went with the safer option. What have you been up to? He leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms loosely. Work mostly. Moved cities a couple of times. Nothing too exciting. That sounds like a lie, I said before I could stop myself. He looked at me, surprised, and then smiled. A real one this time. Okay, maybe a little more than that, he admitted. But I could ask you the same thing. Fair, I said. And just like that, it got easier. We talked about work, about where we'd lived, about the kind of surface-level life updates you give when you're not ready to dig deeper yet. But even in those normal conversations, there was something else running underneath. Familiarity. Not the kind you build in a few minutes. The kind that lingers, even after years. At one point, he said something sarcastic, exactly the way he used to, and I laughed without thinking. It caught both of us off guard. You still do that, I said. Do what? That tone, I replied. Like you're half serious, half messing with me. He huffed a quiet laugh. Yeah, guess some things don't change. No, I said, before I could stop myself. Some things don't. And there it was again. That shift. Subtle, but real. We both felt it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of the conference faded into the background, like we were in our own separate space. Craig looked at me, a little more serious now. I didn't think I'd see you again, he said. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. Me neither, I admitted. And that was the truth. After everything that happened, or didn't happen, I'd file them away as something from another life. Something unresolved, but distant enough not to hurt anymore. At least, that's what I told myself. But standing there now, I could feel it. It wasn't gone. It had just been waiting. I've thought about you, you know, he added, quieter this time. My chest tightened slightly. Yeah, I asked. He nodded. Yeah. I didn't know what to say to that. So I told the truth. Me too. Neither of us looked away. And just like that, the past wasn't in the past anymore. It was right there, between us, unfinished, unspoken, and suddenly impossible to ignore. We didn't notice how long we'd been standing there until the crowd around us started thinning out. At some point, the loud buzz of the conference shifted into that quieter, end-of-day murmur, people wrapping up conversations, exchanging last-minute contacts, already halfway mentally checked out. Craig glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. Do you want to get out of here? He asked. The question landed instantly. Not casual. Not really. Just simple, and loaded in a way we both understood. I hesitated for maybe half a second. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew exactly what it meant. 7 years of distance, and now choosing to step back into each other's space again. Yeah, I said. His shoulders relaxed slightly, like he hadn't been sure what I'd say. Good, he replied, almost under his breath. We didn't make a big deal out of leaving. Just grabbed our things, slipped out with the rest of the crowd, and suddenly we were outside. The air felt different immediately. Cooler, quieter, real. For a moment, we just stood there on the sidewalk, like neither of us had planned past that point. It was almost funny. All that tension inside, and now we were just two people outside a building, not quite sure what came next. There's a place around the corner, Craig said. Nothing fancy, just quieter. Sounds perfect, I replied. We started walking side by side. Not too close, not too far. That careful distance people keep when they're aware of each other in a way that goes beyond normal. I noticed the little things. The way he walked, more confident now. The way he glanced at me occasionally, like he was checking if I was still there. Like maybe this felt just as unreal to him as it did to me. So, I said after a minute, be honest. Always a dangerous start, he replied. I smirked slightly. Did you almost not say anything back there? He exhaled through a quiet laugh. Yeah, I did. Why? He looked ahead for a second before answering. Because I wasn't sure you'd want me to. That stopped me a little. I hadn't expected that. I thought about it, he added. Just walking past. Pretending I wasn't sure it was you. I shook my head. You wouldn't have. He glanced at me. No, I said. You were never good at pretending when it mattered. That earned a small smile from him. Still not, he admitted. We reached the bar a few minutes later. It really was nothing special, dim lighting, quiet music, a handful of people scattered around. Exactly the kind of place where conversations feel more honest than they're supposed to. We grabbed a table near the back. For a second, sitting across from him like that felt familiar in a way that caught me off guard. Like we'd done this before. Like my body remembered something my mind was still trying to process. What? He asked, noticing the way I was looking at him. Nothing, I said quickly. Then, after a pause, it just feels weird. Yeah, he said softly. It does. We ordered drinks, more out of habit than anything else, and once the waiter left, the silence settled in again. But this time, it wasn't awkward, just heavier, because now there was no distraction, no crowd, no background noise to hide behind. Just us. Craig leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. Can I ask you something? He said. Depends, I replied. Is it one of the easy questions or one of the dangerous ones? He smiled faintly. Definitely dangerous. Go ahead. He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Did you hate me? The question hit harder than I expected. Straight to the point. No build-up. That was always him. I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair. No, I said honestly. He didn't look relieved. Should I have? I added. He shook his head quickly. No, he stopped himself, then tried again. I wasn't sure how it ended for you. I let out a quiet breath. That's kind of the problem, I said. It didn't really end. It just stopped. His jaw tightened slightly. Yeah, he murmured. I know. There it was. The first crack in the surface. You disappeared, I said. Not accusing, just stating it. I did, he admitted. Why? He didn't answer right away. The drinks arrived. giving him a few extra seconds, but he didn't touch his. Instead, he looked at me like he was trying to decide how honest to be. I didn't know how to handle it, he said finally. That's vague, I replied. I know, he said. I'm working up to the less vague version. I nodded slightly, giving him space. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. Back then, everything felt bigger than I was ready for, he said. You did. That caught me off guard. Me? I repeated. Yeah, he said, meeting my eyes again. You were sure about things. About yourself. About us. I frowned slightly. I wasn't that sure. You were compared to me, he said. I was still figuring everything out. And instead of saying that, instead of being honest, he shook his head. I left. The honesty in his voice made it hard to hold onto any anger. Not that I'd been holding much anyway. Yeah, I said quietly. You did. Silence stretched again, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of everything we hadn't said back then. I'm sorry, he added. Simple. Direct. I studied his face for a moment, trying to see if it felt real. It did. I know, I said. And I meant that too. We sat there, the tension shifting into something else now. Not gone, but different. Less sharp. More open. So, he said after a moment, voice quieter now. Did you ever? He didn't finish the question. He didn't have to. Move on, I asked. He nodded. I looked down at my glass for a second, then back at him. Yeah, I said. I did. He held my gaze, steady. Did it work, he asked. That question lingered. Not just what he was asking, but how he was asking it. Carefully, like the answer mattered more than he wanted to admit. I thought about it for a second. About everything that had happened in those 7 years. The people, the experiences, the ways I'd changed. Sometimes, I said honestly. He nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what that meant. Yeah, he murmured. Same. And for the first time that night, it felt like we weren't just catching up. We were actually seeing each other again. Not who we used to be, but who we'd become. And somehow, that felt even more dangerous. There's something about honesty that makes everything feel closer. Too close, sometimes. After that moment, after we both admitted we'd tried to move on, and neither of us made it sound convincing, the air between us shifted again. It wasn't just nostalgia anymore. It was awareness of what we used to be, and what we could still be if we let it go there. Craig finally reached for his drink, taking a slow sip, like he needed something to ground himself. So, he said, glancing at me over the rim of his glass, are you staying in the city long? Just for the conference, I replied. Leaving in 2 days. He nodded, processing that. I'm here until the end of the week, he said. Extended it for meetings. Of course he did. Craig always had a way of building his life forward, even when things felt uncertain. That part of him hadn't changed. Busy, I said lightly. Yeah, he replied. Then, after a pause, but not tonight. The way he said it wasn't accidental. I felt it settle somewhere in my chest. Not tonight, I echoed. For a second, neither of us looked away. Then I leaned back slightly, breaking the intensity just enough to breathe again. This is weird, I said, half smiling. Yeah, he said, but not in a bad way. No, I admitted. Not in a bad way. Another pause, but softer now. Less sharp edges. More familiarity creeping back in. So tell me something real, he said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. We've been talking for like an hour. That's not what I mean, he replied. I mean something that matters. I exhaled quietly, considering that. That's a dangerous request, I said. I know, he said. That's why I asked. I looked at him for a moment, then decided not to overthink it. I think. I started slowly. I got really good at pretending things didn't affect me. His expression shifted, subtle, but focused. After you left? He asked. Not just that, I said. But yeah, that was part of it. He nodded slightly, letting me continue. I told myself it didn't matter because we never really defined what we were, I said, which made it easier to act like I didn't lose anything. And did you believe that? He asked. I held his gaze. No. The word landed between us. Honest. Unfiltered. Craig exhaled, looking down for a second before meeting my eyes again. I hated that I didn't explain, he said. Even back then. Then why didn't you? I asked softer this time. He gave a small, almost frustrated smile. Because explaining it would have made it real, he said. And I wasn't ready for that. That made more sense than I wanted it to. You were always better at facing things head on, he added. I wasn't. I shook my head slightly. You're giving me too much credit. No, he said. I'm not. The way he said it, It didn't feel like flattery. It felt like memory. We fell into another quiet moment, but this one felt different. Less about what we were avoiding, more about what we were starting to accept. You know what the worst part was? I said after a while. He leaned in slightly. What? I didn't even get to be mad at you properly, I admitted. Because I never knew what I was mad at. He let out a soft breath. Yeah, he said. That's fair. I kept thinking maybe I imagined it. I added. Like maybe it meant more to me than it did to you. That made him react immediately. No, he said, firm. You didn't imagine it. Something in my chest loosened at that. You were the first person I ever. He stopped himself, then shook his head slightly. The first person that felt real like that. I didn't interrupt. Didn't rush him. I just didn't know what to do with it, he finished. The honesty in his voice made it hard to look away. Yeah, I said quietly. I figured. He studied my face for a second. You deserved better than how I handled it, he added. Maybe, I said. Then, after a pause, but we were younger. That doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed. But it explains it. That seemed to land with him. We both leaned back slightly, like we'd just crossed something important. Not fixed, but acknowledged. And somehow, that felt bigger. Can I ask you something else? He said. I laughed softly. You're really going for it tonight, huh? Yeah, he admitted. Feels like if I don't now, I won't get another chance. That hit. Because it was true. 2 days. That's all this was guaranteed to be. Okay, I said. Go ahead. He hesitated for just a second this time. Then, if I hadn't left back then, what do you think would have happened? The question caught me off guard. Not because it was unexpected, but because I'd asked myself the same thing more times than I wanted to admit. I looked at him, really looked this time, at who he was now, not just who he used to be. I think, I said slowly, we would have tried. Tried, he repeated. Yeah, I said. And I think we would have messed it up anyway. That surprised him. You do, he asked. Yeah, I said. Because we weren't ready. Either of us. He leaned back slightly, considering that. Probably true, he admitted. But, I added. He looked at me again. But I think it would have meant something either way. That stayed between us. Unfinished. Like everything else. Craig's expression softened slightly. It did mean something, he said. I know, I replied. And this time, there was no doubt in it. We sat there, the conversation slowing. Not because we ran out of things to say, but because we were finally saying the things that mattered. And that changes the pace of everything. After a while, he glanced at his watch, then back at me. Do you want to walk a bit? He asked. Now. I said. Yeah, he replied. Just not ready to end this yet. Neither was I. Okay, I said. We paid, stepped back out into the night, and the city felt quieter than before. Or maybe it was just us. We walked side by side again, but this time closer. Not touching, just closer. And after a few minutes, Craig spoke again. Can I be honest about something else? He said. I let out a quiet laugh. At this point, I'd be disappointed if you weren't. He smiled slightly. Then his voice softened. Seeing you again didn't feel like running into someone from my past, he said. I glanced at him. What did it feel like? I asked. He met my eyes, steady, like something I never finished. That stopped me. Completely. Because that was exactly it. Exactly what I hadn't been able to put into words. I swallowed slightly, looking ahead for a moment before answering. Yeah, I said quietly. It does feel like that. We kept walking. But now, everything felt different. Not just familiar, not just nostalgic, but unfinished. And suddenly, very real again. We walked longer than either of us planned. At some point, the city shifted from busy streets to quieter ones, where the noise faded into something softer, just distant traffic, the occasional voice, footsteps echoing slightly against the pavement. I wasn't even paying attention to where we were going. Just to him, to the way this felt. Familiar, but not the same. Back then, everything between us had been uncertain in a different way. It was new, unspoken, fragile because we didn't know what it was yet. Now, it felt fragile because we knew exactly what it could be. And that made every step heavier. You ever think about that last day? Craig asked suddenly. I glanced at him. Yeah, I said. More than I probably should have. He nodded like he expected that. Me too, he admitted. We slowed down a little, like the conversation itself was asking us to. I remember waiting, I said after a moment. His expression shifted immediately. For what? He asked, even though I think he already knew. For you to say something, I replied. Anything. The words came out calmer than I expected. No anger. Just truth. Craig exhaled slowly, looking down for a second. Yeah, he said. I know. I kept thinking you would. I added. That you'd show up, or call, or at least explain. I wanted to, he said quietly. I stopped walking. He took a couple more steps before realizing, then turned back to face me. Then why didn't you? I asked. Not sharp, not accusing, just honest. He held my gaze, and for the first time that night, I saw something heavier in his expression. Regret. Real, unfiltered regret. Because I thought it would be easier for you if I didn't, he said. I let out a small, disbelieving breath. You thought disappearing was easier? I thought dragging it out would hurt more, he corrected. It did hurt more, I said. That landed. Hard. He nodded slowly, like he was accepting that fully now, not just hearing it. I didn't give you a choice, he said. No, I replied. You didn't. Silence settled between us again, but this one felt different. Not tense, just real. Like we'd finally said the part that had been sitting between us for years. Craig stepped a little closer, not too close, just enough that it felt intentional. I'm sorry, Lucas, he said. The way he said my name, it hit differently this time. Not like earlier. This wasn't surprise or nostalgia. This was something deeper. I know, I said quietly. And I did. That didn't erase anything. But it mattered. We stood there for a moment, neither of us rushing to move, like we both understood that this exact moment, was something we didn't get back. You know what's messed up? I said after a while. What? He asked. I don't think I ever actually stopped wondering about you, I admitted. His expression softened immediately. Yeah, he asked. Yeah, I said. Not in some dramatic, all-consuming way. Just in the background. He nodded slowly. Same, he said. And again, I believed him. We started walking again, slower now. More aware of each other. There were times I almost reached out, he added. That caught my attention. Why didn't you? I asked. He gave a small, almost ironic smile. Because after a while, it feels like too much time has passed, he said. Like you missed your window. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah, I said. I know that feeling. We walked in silence for a bit after that. But it wasn't empty. It was processing. Everything we'd just said. Everything we hadn't said yet. Eventually, we ended up near a small park, nothing big, just a few benches, some dim lights, trees casting soft shadows across the path. Craig gestured toward a bench. Sit, he asked. Yeah, I said. We sat down, not too close, but closer than before. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel like pressure. Just space. I don't want this to be just tonight, he said suddenly. I turned to look at him. That's honest, I said. I'm trying to be, he replied. I studied his face, trying to read what was underneath that. Then what do you want it to be? I asked. He didn't answer right away, which, somehow, felt more honest than if he had. I don't know yet, he said finally. But I know I don't want to walk away from this again like it didn't matter. That hit. Because that was exactly what I was afraid of. That's not something you can say lightly, I said. I'm not saying it lightly, he replied. Our eyes held. And for a second, it felt like everything narrowed down to just that. Choice. Not what we had before, but what we do now. I'm leaving in 2 days, I said. I know, he said. And you're staying, I added. Yeah. The reality of it settled between us. Timing. Distance. The same kind of things that complicate everything. But this time, it felt different. Because now we knew what it meant to lose it. I don't want to rush this just because it's limited, I said. I don't either, he replied. Another pause. Then, quieter. But I also don't want to waste it. That was the balance, wasn't it? Not rushing. Not running. Not pretending it didn't matter. I nodded slightly. Okay, I said. He looked at me like he was waiting for more. Okay, what? He asked. Okay, we don't treat this like a coincidence, I said. We treat it like it means something. His expression shifted, something like relief, mixed with something else. Hope. Yeah, he said softly. I want that. We sat there a little longer, the weight of that agreement settling in. Not a plan, not a promise, but something real. Eventually, Craig stood up, offering a hand. I looked at it for a second, then took it. Simple, natural, and somehow bigger than it should have been. We started walking again, slower now. And for the first time that night, the silence between us didn't feel like something we needed to fill. It felt like something we were choosing to stay in. Together. And I realized something in that moment. Seeing him again wasn't the complicated part. Staying in this, that was where everything would change. We didn't rush back. That was the first thing I noticed. There was no unspoken urgency, no pressure to turn the night into something it didn't need to be. We just walked, sometimes talking, sometimes not, letting everything we'd said settle into something quieter, more stable. But the closeness stayed. Not physical, just there. When we finally reached the street near my hotel, I slowed down a little. "This is me," I said. Craig glanced up at the building, then back at me. "Right?" he said, like he'd forgotten the night had an endpoint. Neither of us moved right away. That same feeling again, like stepping away from this moment meant risking something slipping through our hands. "So," he said, exhaling slightly, "I guess this is where I say goodnight." "Yeah," I replied, but it didn't feel like enough. Not after everything. Not after 7 years. "You could come up," I said before I had time to overthink it. The words hung there for a second. Craig didn't react immediately, but I saw it register. Not surprise. Consideration. Careful, intentional consideration. "I could," he said slowly. And then he shook his head, just slightly. "But I don't think I should." That caught me off guard. "Why?" I asked. He held my gaze, steady. "Because I don't want this to feel like something we rushed into," he said. "Or something we might regret tomorrow because it happened too fast." That wasn't what I expected. And somehow, it meant more. "I wouldn't regret it," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "But I might regret how we got there." I studied him for a second. "You've changed," I said. He gave a small smile. "I'm trying to." There was no tension in it. No rejection. Just intention. And I respected that more than I thought I would. "Okay," I said. He nodded once, like that mattered to him. "It's not a no," he added. "It's just not like this." "Yeah," I said. "I get that." Another pause. But this one felt different. Less uncertain. More grounded. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried weight. "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "What time are you free?" he asked. "I've got panels until about 3, I replied. "After that, I'm free." "Then I'll meet you after," he said. "Okay." There was something about the way we said it. Not casual. Not vague. Clear. Intentional. Like we were both choosing this, not just letting it happen. Craig shifted slightly, like he was about to leave. Then stopped. "Lucas," he said. "Yeah. I'm really glad I didn't walk past you today." That hit deeper than it should have. "Me too," I said. We stood there for one last second, neither of us quite ready to break it. Then he stepped forward and hugged me. Simple, warm, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. I didn't hesitate, just held on to him the same way. No overthinking, no second guessing, just that moment. When we pulled back, everything felt a little clearer. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," I echoed. And then he walked away. I watched him go longer than I meant to. Not because I was unsure, but because I was trying to hold on to how this felt. Not like something slipping away, but like something starting. The next day felt different from the moment I woke up. I wasn't thinking about the conference, or the panels, or anything I was supposed to be doing. Just him. Not in that overwhelming, obsessive way. More like awareness. Like something had shifted slightly out of place, and now everything felt a little sharper. More real. I checked my phone more than I wanted to admit. Not because I was waiting for him to text, but because part of me still didn't fully trust that this was actually happening. That it hadn't just been a one-night collision of timing and memory. But then, around noon, my phone buzzed. "Craig, still on for today?" I smiled without thinking. "Me, yeah? 3 p.m. Craig, I'll be there." Simple. Clear. Just like last night. And somehow, that grounded me more than anything else. By the time 3 o'clock came around, I was already outside the conference building. I told myself I was just getting fresh air, that I wasn't waiting. But I was. And when I saw him walking toward me, I felt it again. That same quiet shift in my chest. Not overwhelming. Just right. He stopped in front of me, a small smile forming. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. And just like that, it wasn't awkward. No hesitation. No weird reset. Just continuation. Like we'd paused something instead of ending it. "You ready to escape this place again?" he asked. "Definitely," I said. We started walking, falling into step easily. "So what's the plan today?" I asked. He shrugged slightly. "I was thinking we don't make one." I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like your old strategy." He smiled. "Yeah, but this time it's intentional." I laughed quietly. "Okay," I said. No plan. We walked without direction at first, just letting the city take us wherever it did. And after a few minutes, I realized something. Yesterday had been about the past, about understanding what happened. Today, this felt like something else. Not catching up, not revisiting, just being with him now. And somehow, that felt even more important. We didn't plan anything, but somehow the day filled itself. We walked through side streets that neither of us had probably noticed before, stopped for coffee we barely drank, sat on a bench for a while, just watching people pass like we weren't part of the same world as them. It was easy, too easy, and that's what made me aware of it. This feels different, I said at one point, glancing at him as we walked. Craig looked at me, slightly curious. Different how? I thought about it for a second. Yesterday felt like we were trying to figure something out, I said. Today just feels like we're here. He nodded slowly, like that made sense to him. Yeah, he said. I feel that too. There was no pressure in it. No rush to define anything. No need to constantly fill the silence. We just moved through the day like we'd already found some kind of rhythm. And that scared me a little. Not because it felt wrong. Because it felt natural. Like we hadn't lost 7 years at all. Like we'd just picked up where we left off, but with a version of ourselves that actually understood what we were doing now. We ended up grabbing something to eat in a small place tucked between two larger restaurants. Quiet, warm, nothing special. But it didn't matter. None of it did. Because every conversation felt like it was building something, even when we were talking about nothing important. At one point, Craig leaned back slightly, watching me with that same thoughtful expression he had yesterday. What? I asked. You're the same in some ways, he said. Is that a good thing? I replied. Yeah, he said. It is. I smiled slightly. You're not, though. He raised an eyebrow. No, I said. You're more steady. He let out a quiet breath, like that word meant something to him. I had to be, he said. For yourself? I asked. For everything, he replied. There was something behind that. Something he wasn't fully explaining yet. But I didn't push. Not yet. You ever think about why this is happening now? He asked after a moment. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? Like, out of all the places, all the timing, he said. We run into each other here. I shrugged lightly. Coincidence. He shook his head just a little. Doesn't feel like one. I looked at him for a second. What does it feel like then? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Which, again, felt more honest than anything immediate would have been. Like we got another chance to not mess it up, he said finally. That stayed with me. Longer than I expected. Because that's what this was starting to feel like. Not just reconnecting. Not just revisiting something old. But being given the same thing again, with the awareness we didn't have before. And that's a rare kind of situation. Do you think we would? I asked quietly. Mess it up, he said. Yeah. He looked at me, steady. I think we could, he said. If we fall back into the same patterns. That was honest. And if we don't? I asked. He held my gaze. Then maybe it turns into something we actually keep. My chest tightened slightly at that. Not in a bad way. Just real. We didn't say anything for a moment after that. Because there wasn't anything to add. Later, as the sun started dipping lower, we found ourselves back near the center of the city again. Not intentionally. Just naturally. This is your last full day, right? Craig said. Yeah, I replied. He nodded, like he'd been thinking about that already. I don't like that, he admitted. I smiled faintly. Yeah, me neither. There it was again. That awareness of time. Of how limited this actually was. And how much that mattered. What are we doing about that, he asked. I looked at him. That's a big question, I said. I know, he replied. But he didn't take it back. Which meant he really wanted an answer. I thought about it for a moment. About everything we'd said. Everything we'd felt. Everything we hadn't fully defined yet. I don't think we decide everything right now, I said slowly. He nodded, listening. But I also don't think we walk away from this again like it was nothing, I added. Agreed, he said immediately. That part was easy. Too easy. The harder part was everything after. Distance complicates things, I said. Yeah, he replied. But it doesn't erase them, I added. His expression shifted slightly at that. Where do you live now, he asked. I told him. He nodded, thinking. I'm about a 2-hour flight from there, he said. That surprised me. Seriously? I asked. Yeah, he said. Relocated last year. I let out a quiet breath. Of course. Of course it wouldn't be impossible. That would have been too simple. So it's not unrealistic, he added. No, I said. It's not. We stood there for a moment, both realizing what that meant. This wasn't just a closed chapter reopening for a couple of days. This had the potential to continue. If we chose it. If we do this, he said carefully, I don't want it to be half-hearted. I don't either, I replied. I mean actually try, he added. Not just see what happens. I held his gaze. Yeah, I said. Me too. There was a quiet understanding in that moment. Not a full plan. Not a perfect solution. But something real. Intentional. And that mattered more than anything else. Come on, he said after a second, a small smile returning. Let's not spend your last day just standing here overthinking everything. I laughed lightly. That sounds like a good idea. We started walking again. But this time, there was something new between us. Not just history, not just possibility, but a direction. Unclear, unfinished, but finally, chosen. There's something strange about last days. They carry weight even when you try to ignore it. Everything feels a little sharper. Conversations linger longer. Silences mean more than they should. And every time you check the clock, there's this quiet awareness sitting in the back of your mind. This is running out. I felt it the moment I woke up. Not anxiety, not pressure, just awareness. I stayed in bed for a few extra minutes, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 2 days without even meaning to. Running into Craig. That first conversation. The way everything shifted so quickly and somehow still felt steady. It didn't feel rushed. That was the part one couldn't get over. It should have felt rushed. 7 years of nothing, and suddenly we're here again. But it didn't feel like we skipped anything. It felt like we finally caught up to something that had been waiting. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Craig, coffee before you disappear? I smiled before I could stop myself. Mia? Same place as yesterday? Craig, I'll be there. Simple. Again. But there was something grounding about that now. When I got there, he was already sitting outside, 2 coffees on the table like he knew exactly what I'd order. You're getting predictable, I said as I sat down. He smirked slightly. Or I just remember. That landed somewhere deeper than it should have. Hey, he added softer now. Hey. There was no awkwardness. No reset. Just continuation. Like yesterday had never ended. We sat there for a while, not rushing into anything serious. Talking about small things again, random observations, people passing by, something dumb he saw on the way there. But underneath it, I could feel it. The same thing he probably felt too. This was the last day. At least, the last one like this. So what time's your flight? He asked eventually. Tonight, I said. Around 8. He nodded slowly. Okay. That was it. Just okay. But I could hear what was behind it. We both could. What? I asked, watching him. He shook his head slightly. Nothing. Just thinking. About. I pressed. He hesitated for a second. About how I don't want this to feel like an ending, he said. That hit immediately. It doesn't have to be, I replied. I know, he said. But it could be, if we're not careful. He wasn't wrong. That's the thing about moments like this. They can either become something real or something you look back on and wonder about for years. And we'd already done that once. I don't want to wonder again, I said quietly. His eyes met mine instantly. Neither do I. There it was. Clear. No hesitation. We sat in that for a second. Not heavy. Just honest. So we don't let it be that, he said. Okay, I replied. But this time, okay wasn't enough on its own. We both knew that. How, he asked. That was the real question. Not what we felt, but what we were going to do with it. I thought about it for a second. Then, we keep showing up, I said. He frowned slightly, like he wanted more. That's it, he asked. That's not small, I replied. We talk. We visit. We don't disappear when things get complicated. His expression shifted. Because that was the difference. That was exactly what hadn't happened before. I can do that, he said. I held his gaze. Yeah. I asked. Yeah, he said, steady. I'm not running this time. Something in my chest settled at that. Not completely, but enough. And you? He asked. I'm not pretending it doesn't matter this time, I said. That earned a small smile from him. Good, he said. We stayed there a while longer, letting the conversation soften again. But everything after that felt different. Not uncertain, just open. We spent the rest of the day the same way we had the last one. Walking, talking, stopping randomly without needing a reason. At one point, we ended up near the river, leaning against the railing, watching the water move slowly under the late afternoon light. Neither of us spoke for a while. We didn't need to. This feels like something I don't want to leave, I said eventually. Craig nodded. Yeah, he said. I know. I glanced at him. Are we doing something stupid? I asked. He let out a quiet breath, thinking about it. Maybe, he said. But I think not doing it would be worse. I laughed softly. That's not very reassuring. He smiled slightly. It's honest. That it was. And honestly, I preferred that. Because this wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean or easy or fully figured out. But it was real. And that mattered more. By the time we got back near my hotel, the sky had already started dimming. There it was again. That moment. The one where things either pause or move forward. Your ride soon, he asked. Yeah, I said. We stopped just outside the entrance. Neither of us rushing it. Neither of us pretending it was just another goodbye. Lucas, he said. Yeah. I'm really glad this happened. Me too, I said. He stepped closer this time. No hesitation. And pulled me into a hug again. It felt different from the first one. Not tentative. Not careful. Just sure. I held on to him the same way. Because I didn't want to overthink it. Didn't want to measure it. Just wanted to feel it. When we pulled back, neither of us moved far. Text me when you land, he said. I will. And I'll look at flights, he added. That made me smile. Already? I asked. He shrugged slightly. I said I'm not wasting this. I shook my head, but I couldn't stop smiling. Okay, I said. Okay, he echoed. We stood there 1 second longer. Then I stepped back. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. Go, he said softly. Yeah. I turned. Walked toward the entrance, and didn't look back right away. Not because I didn't want to. But because this time, I didn't need to. Because for the first time in 7 years, this didn't feel like something I was losing. It felt like something I was taking with me. The flight felt shorter than it should have. Or maybe my mind just didn't register most of it. I kept replaying everything, small moments more than anything else. The way he said my name. The way nothing felt forced. The way we didn't rush into something just because we could have. That part stayed with me the most. Because this time, we didn't ruin it by trying to skip ahead. When the plane landed, I didn't wait. Lucas, landed. The reply came faster than I expected. Craig, good. I've been checking my phone like an idiot. I smiled, walking through the airport, suddenly more aware of everything around me again. Lucas, that makes 2 of us. Craig, how was the flight? Lucas, uneventful. Thought about you more than I should admit. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough to feel intentional. Craig, yes, same. That was enough. We didn't need to overfill it. The first few days after felt strange. Not in a bad way. Just different. Because now there was distance again. But unlike before, it wasn't silence. It wasn't absence. It was effort. We texted. Not constantly. Not in that overwhelming way that burns out fast. Just consistently. Small things. Random thoughts. Reminded me of something you said. Passed a place you would have liked. Long day, but I keep thinking about that walk by the river. It built slowly. Naturally. And more importantly, it stayed. No disappearing. No guessing. No wondering if the other person still meant what they said. About a week later, he called. Not a text. Not a message. A call. I stared at my phone for half a second before answering. Hey, I said. Hey, he replied. There was a small pause. Not awkward. Just real. I wanted to hear your voice, he admitted. That hit harder than anything else had. Yeah. I said. Yeah, he replied. Texts weren't enough today. I leaned back slightly, letting that settle. Good, I said. Because I was starting to think the same thing. He laughed quietly. And just like that, it felt like the distance shrank a little. A month passed. Then another. And we didn't fall apart. That was the difference. We didn't fall into old patterns. We didn't let things fade when life got busy. We showed up, just like we said we would. And eventually, it stopped feeling like effort. It just became part of my life. Part of his too. The first time he visited, it didn't feel like a big, overwhelming moment. No pressure. No expectations. Just him, standing there again, in real life, like he had at the conference. But this time, there was no hesitation at all. Hey, he said. Hey. And then he pulled me into a hug like it was the most natural thing in the world. And it was. We didn't rush into labels. Didn't force anything into a box too early. But we also didn't pretend it was nothing. There was no confusion. No mixed signals. Just something growing. Steady. Real. One night, a few months in, we were sitting together, quiet, the kind of comfortable silence that used to scare me before, but didn't anymore. Craig glanced at me. You ever think about how close we were to never having this? He asked. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah, I said. All the time. He nodded slowly. I almost walked past you, he said again. And I almost didn't say yes to leaving with you, I added. He smiled slightly. Would have been a stupid decision, he said. Yeah, I agreed. It would have. We sat there for a second. Then he reached for my hand. Simple. Intentional. Like everything else we'd built. I'm glad we didn't miss it again, he said quietly. I looked at him. Not the version I used to know. Not the memory. But who he was now. And who we were now. Me too, I said. Looking back, I think the hardest part wasn't losing him the first time. It was not knowing what we could have been. That question stayed with me longer than anything else. But now, I don't have that question anymore. Because we didn't just get another chance. We chose it. And this time, we didn't let go.